They think that because I lied to them and told them that it was a lie detector. We've done this a few times now, and people seem to enjoy it, so we went ahead and did it again. This time with an adorable young lady whose name is Joelle. Hello. How are you?
Okay.
Now, this is the Truth Fairy. The Truth Fairy is going to hook you up to this machine. Go ahead and start doing that. This is called a lie detector. Do you know what that is?
No.
A lie detector is a machine that is able to know if you're telling the truth or not. Okay? So I'm going to ask you to just tell the truth, the whole truth, and not a half truth. Okay? Okay. Is that comfortable on your head? Okay, we're off to a bad start. It feels a little uncomfortable, right? Okay. What is your name?
Joelle.
Okay, Joelle. How old are you?
5.5.
And what grade are you in?
Kindergarten.
Kindergarten? Do you like all the other kids at school?
A few not.
A few not. Who do you have a problem with?
Once I was playing on the playground, this guy was being really mean to me, so I don't like that guy. His name's Riley.
Riley. Okay, Riley. All right. Anybody else?
No.
Nobody else? Do you secretly love Riley?
No.
A little bit?
Just a little.
Sometimes that happens when boys will tease girls at school and they're mean to them. It's because they really like them. Did you know that?
No.
So I have a feeling Riley has a crush on you. Mm-hmm. Have you ever killed anyone?
No.
Okay. Do you think you ever will kill anyone?
No.
Okay, that's good. Do you know who let the dogs out?
Yeah.
Who? Who? That's weird that it would do that, huh? Are you always nice to the other kids in your class?
Yes.
Not always?
Not always. I have a friend named Jaden, and once I tagged her on her, because when I was drawing, she just scribbled on it.
Oh, she scrabbled all over your drawing?
Mm-hmm.
And you tattled on her?
Yeah.
And you felt like that wasn't a nice thing to do?
Yeah.
But why did she scrabble all over your drawing?
I don't know.
That wasn't a nice thing for her to do. Would you ever scrabble on her
No,
drawing?
no.
You did scrabble on her drawing.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I thought. All right. Do you have any secrets that you're keeping from me?
Yes. I like Griffin.
You like Griffin? Who's Griffin?
There's a boy in school and he's really cute.
Oh, he is? His name's Griffin? Does he know you think he's cute?
Yeah. Because once he chased me.
Uh-huh. That's how you know. Did he never catch you?
No?
But secretly you want him to keep chasing you, don't you?
Yes.
Isn't that always the way? That's why we can't figure women out. I mean, what is it with you people? You know? Anything you want to ask the Truth Fairy? Go ahead.
For my birthday, can you buy me a gumball machine?
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's very nice to meet you. Thank you for coming to the Truth Fairy.
Oh, that was great. That was really good. I think that Jimmy Kimmel may have stumbled onto something inadvertently here that would be very helpful for parents. You know, you don't even need an actual lie detector machine. I think I want to build one of these, it's like a colander, I think, on their head. I need to build one of those. I mean, I could just get that and kind of ask my kids all the questions I want to ask them and just kind of weed them all out, you know? But I have found with my kids, when I ask them questions, if they're going to get caught, you know, saying something that maybe isn't exactly true, that they kind of want to come clean, you know, because they're kind of a little afraid. They feel pretty bad about what has happened there, you know. They just don't really know how to tell lies very well. But what if, there's kind of all sorts of people, you know, that I would maybe like to put on a lie detector, you know, I'd like to put my kids on there. There's politicians I'd like to put on a lie detector test. It's just kind of all sorts of people. But what if you felt so distrustworthy with your elders, your leaders at church, that you felt like you needed to put an elder on the lie detector test? I was on staff at church one time. And there was a person on the staff who was getting older, and some of the leadership wanted to replace this person. And one of the people found someone that they really liked who could maybe take their place. And so they interviewed this candidate, the elders did, the leadership did, and they were ready to offer this guy a job. And I remember being in the elders meeting and saying, what do we do about this other person who's still on staff? And we haven't even told this person that they, that they're kind of, their job's on the line here. What do you do if you offer this new candidate a job and he turns you down and says no? And one of the elders said, well, we'll just never mention it to them. I thought, wow. And so the guy that they wanted to hire, he turned him down. And they just never said anything to this other person who they really wanted to let go. What do you think about that? What do you do if you think you need to get your church leaders on a lie detector test? What do you do if the leaders of your church are not all that they appear to be? We're doing a series, we're calling it The Good Life. We're studying the Book of Titus. And if you want to open up your Bibles there, that'd be great. Or if you have your phones, there's probably a great little Bible app that you could use, and you could turn to Titus with us. We call it the Book of Titus. It's probably not a great description of it. It's very small. It's not much of what I consider a book. It's a short letter. It's about a page and a half. You could read it very quickly if you wanted to. And it is a letter that is written by a missionary, an older missionary, to a preacher on the island of Crete. And we've learned a lot about Crete over the last few weeks, haven't we? If you've kind of been here, hopefully you've learned a lot about the island of Crete. And what we've learned is it's a very tough place. I mean, if there was anywhere that you wanted to plant a church, I would imagine that Crete would be about the most difficult. It's a place that we've learned that was full of people who were considered at the time maybe the most despicable people on the planet. Certainly during their time, maybe in the history of the world. They were known worldwide as a bunch of liars. I mean, if you just kind of had to, Paul was asked, just kind of how do you sum up all these people? And he said the best way to sum up all the people on Crete is that they're all a bunch of liars. They were swindlers, they were cheats. They'd taken lying and deception to an art form. They'd become proud of it. And so there's a saying that you can't out-Cretan a Cretan. And they're kind of the swindlers of the swindlers. There was no way that you could deceive a Cretan because they were master deceivers. They turned it into an art form, and they had become proud of it. And so on Crete, you could not trust your neighbors. And you could not trust your government. And you could not trust the people you looked up to as heroes. And what's worse is you couldn't even trust your own family because they were all probably lying to you. And what we've discovered on Crete is that their main industry was what? You remember? Piracy. That's right. It's just arg, right? I mean, it's just an island full of pirates. I mean, it just sounds like a great place to live, doesn't it? Every city is fighting other cities. There's no unity on the whole island. And so there's this preacher who starts a church in Crete. And this preacher, he gets a letter from an older missionary or theologian, we call him the Apostle Paul. And Titus is this preacher, and he's doing his best, he thought, but we saw last week that he made a few mistakes. And so Paul writes him this letter to get him back on track, and he tells him very early on in the letter what he should be doing, what he should be prioritizing. So Titus 1, verse 5, we read this last week. Here's what Titus should be doing. Verse 5, the reason I left you in Crete was that you might put in order what was left unfinished and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. Now, Paul tells him two big things, right? He tells him you need to straighten out the church and you need to establish leadership. And the kind of leadership that he wants established here is what he calls elders. And so today we're going to talk about what it looks like to have elders and what it's going to involve to get elders on the island of Crete. What are elders? What should they look like? And what happens in this letter is sort of backwards. So what Paul's going to do is he's going to tell Titus what makes for a good elder. And then afterwards he's going to tell him why you need these type of people. And so my plan, as I was getting ready for this week, my plan was to do one big sermon on elders. Kind of what they are, what they look like, what qualifies them, and why you need them. And so I started kind of writing this sermon. And as I got to, to about Tuesday, I realized that my sermon, if I just did one sermon, was going to be about an hour and 10 minutes long. And so I figured maybe you don't want an hour and 10 minute sermon. I don't know, do you?
Yeah.
We do.
It was very encouraging, but I decided to go ahead and split it up.
Amen.
I said, okay, there we go. That's the truth. Not everything is as it appears to be right now. I go, yeah. Okay, we're gonna come back to that later. So my plan was to do one big sermon, and I thought an hour and 10 minutes sounded a little long, so I decided to break it up. So today we're going to talk about what an elder looks like. And in Titus 1 here, verses 6 through 9, Paul tells us what an elder should look like. And then in verses 10 through 16, he's going to tell us why we need him. So we're going to deal with the first part today, and then next week we'll pick up next time. And so we'll break it into two. Someone once told me, when you preach, you should have a good beginning, and you should have a good ending, and you should keep them as close together as possible. That's so I think that might be probably pretty good advice. So I decided to split this one into two. So today we're going to talk about what elders should be like, and then next week why you really need them, okay? So the two kind of go together. I just want you to keep that in mind here, all right? Now, a big part of Titus has to do with elders. Now, often in the life of a church, when it comes time to select new elders, what we do is we go to two places, really. We usually go either to Titus or to 1 Timothy 3. It's where we usually go to get qualifications for elders, and we usually only go there. People don't often do a series through these books as much as we go there when we need to do something. We need to get some qualifications for how elders are, and so we go there to try to get the list that's there to help us. And so we're going to take a look at least Titus here today. But what we don't want to do is we want to be very careful not to go to Titus in order to just kind of craft our picture of what an elder should be. We want to go to Titus and see what does the text say in context and what does God have to teach us out of that. Okay? So we're going to look at these qualifications for elders. What does an elder look like? What kind of person would make for a good elder? Now, what you have to realize right up front before we read any of this is that this isn't a total list. This isn't a comprehensive list. It's not an exhaustive list. I think it's a good list, but it does not include everything that you might possibly want in an elder. It's just not exhaustive. It's not comprehensive. It doesn't cover everything. For instance, we're about to read a list, and nowhere in the list of qualifications for elder does it ever once mention love. To love people. Well, that's interesting, because if you were to ask me, what would be the qualifications for an elder? What are the top things that you would want in a person who is in leadership in a church? I think probably right up there near the top would be love, don't you? I mean, kind of right there at the top. I mean, it just seems like a bottom line standard for what it means to follow Jesus is that you love God and that you love other people. And so certainly a part of what it means to be in leadership in church must be that you love God and love other people, since it's just kind of the basic standard for what it means to follow Jesus. It's a huge qualification, but Paul doesn't even mention it here. And so there's some other things that are obviously not included here, but what I want us to see as we read this list is that Paul is singling out some items of character that are uniquely imperative on the island of Crete. Are there more things that we can kind of add to the list of what an elder is that are very important? Absolutely. But what I want you to notice as we read this list is these are the things that are uniquely imperative. You must have them if you're going to have a good church on the island of Crete at this time. Is it a comprehensive list for all time? No. But it is a list of specific needs of a community at a specific time. I told you last week that these letters in the New Testament are written for us, but they are not written to us. They are written to a unique group of people at a unique time and a unique culture, and there are things that we can learn from them. They are for us in that way, but they are not written to us. And so it isn't a whole list. In fact, if you turn to another book in the New Testament, the book of 1 Timothy, which I already mentioned, you'd read another letter to another young preacher in the city of Ephesus, and Paul gives him, we're not going to read today, but you could go look at it, 1 Timothy chapter 3, Paul gives him a list of qualifications for elders in the city of Ephesus. And as you read through it, you'll notice some similarities, but you'll also notice that there are some differences. Why? Because Paul is highlighting the unique character qualities that are needed, that are imperative in Ephesus at that time. This is very important, okay, because we got to make sure that we consider context. To understand any book of the Bible, and particularly letters in the Bible, we need to consider all of the context. And many times, I want us to be better Bible students, okay? I want us to be better students of the Bible where we read it and we can apply it appropriately. And to apply it appropriately, often we need to know the context. Because many times, we just kind of take the Bible verses out of context, and then we just jump to these conclusions, and we often get on these really weird applications because of our conclusions without any context. For instance, maybe Revelation. You ever notice how people read the book of Revelation, and they come out of it with just kind of all these weird ideas? You know, you kind of read all these things, and people have a roadmap for how the world's going to end, and just kind of all these weird conclusions out of Revelation. It's because they kind of read it, and they didn't take into a context who wrote it, and who they wrote it to, and what was going on with those people that it was written to at the time. Just kind of the context of things. And so context is really, really important. I don't think I could stress that enough, all right? And it's why I've gone to such lengths, maybe you've noticed this over the last few weeks, it's why I've gone to such lengths to include so much context for this letter. In fact, you're probably tired. If you've been here over the last 3 or 4 weeks, you probably know what I'm going to say at the beginning of my talk. Before I even say it, like, yes, I know, it's the island of Crete, there's pirates, they're all swindlers, you could probably say it nearly as well as I could at this point. And it's why I've gone to that length to kind of explain it and review it each week, is because context is so important for this book. And when we get to these qualifications, maybe some of you have read these qualifications, or you've been a part of churches where you went through these qualifications and you've applied them and you just kind of pulled them out and had to use them. But what I want to tell you is that context means so much. And what I'm hoping is that we get to the end of this thing today and you look at these qualifications and you can see, because of all this context, why these things are so uniquely important to the island of Crete. Okay? So hang in there. I think this context is really important. And I hope that you'll see why these qualities are so needed here. And then next week we'll see why and how it applies to us today. Now, what we see when we read these qualifications is that actually Paul is going to give really only one big qualification. There's one big qualification, and then he's going to kind of explain, he's going to expand on that qualification and all the kind of arenas that it touches. But there's really one big qualification, and he says it in Titus 1:6. He says, an elder must be blameless. That's the one qualification. What does an elder need to be? An elder needs to be blameless. Verse 7, if you jump down, he says it again. Since an overseer manages God's household, he must be blameless. That's the one qualification. It's one qualification, but he says it 2 times, I guess, just to kind of drive it home. You know, sometimes we need the point driven home a little bit. So he says it twice, but it's just one qualification. And so he's going to tell us the qualification. He says it twice, and then he's going to tell us what it means. And so what does it mean to be blameless? I mean, if there's one qualification, it might be pretty important to know what that one qualification is. What does it mean to be blameless? Well, it doesn't mean to be spotless. It doesn't mean to be faultless. It doesn't mean to be perfect. Now, I think we have. Have we had enough background on Crete so far to know that if the qualification here is to be perfect, that you're just not going to find anyone who fits the bill on the island of Crete? I mean, I hope we've had enough context here at this point that you know that there just isn't anybody perfect on the island of Crete. If that's the standard, I mean, you're not going to have any elders in this church, right? I mean, so it just can't mean that. So what does it mean? Well, what do we know about Cretans? Well, what we know about them is that they're liars, that they're con men, that they're swindlers, that they're deceivers, that they tell you one thing, but really, there's something else. And I mean, they've been doing it at this point for like 1,500 years, just kind of ripping people off. They call it the Cretan way. You appear to be one way, but later, you're something else in order to rip someone else off. And so what does blameless mean? Well, if you were just to kind of just translate this word simply, what blameless really means is you are who you appear to be. That's what blameless means. It means you are who you appear to be. You're true. You're authentic. You are trustworthy. You are consistent. Who you appear to be is who you really are. You are someone who is not following the Cretan way. You're someone who could be trusted. And Paul says this is the one qualification on the island of Crete to be an elder, and maybe for all time on this one, okay? But the one qualification is you need to be someone who is who he appears to be. Now, could you see why that might be a pretty big, important qualification on the island of Crete? You see, because on this island, nobody is who they seem to be. And you get to know someone, and you think you know them, but right about the time that you think you know them, you find out that there's somebody completely different, and you're duped. You're swindled. And Paul says, you can't find people like that. When it comes to leaders in the church, you got to find someone who is as they appear to be. I remember when I was in high school, I played on this basketball team. And we showed up for one of these tournaments. I don't know if you played sports, but often there was, tournaments that would go on, and we'd show up. And you get to a tournament, you kind of look at the teams that come in, and you size them up as you come. Especially when you're a little guy like me, you're sizing up everybody like, oh man, that person's enormous, And so we kind of came in, and we're sizing everybody up. And there was this one team that came in. They came in. We rode these, the big yellow school buses. This team, they came in on those like touring buses in high school, right? They came in on these big touring buses, and they got off, and they were all in, we were just wearing sweatpants and stuff, and we had our uniforms that we changed into when we got into locker room. But this team came off of these tour buses, and they were wearing like matching, warm-up suits, all sponsored by Nike. And we were like, wow, and then we got out on the court, and we were kind of warming up, and we saw this team come out. We were playing a team, they were going to have to play them next. And so we were looking at them come out, and they all come out, and they had all, their uniforms were all nice. They were all Nike sponsored and all that stuff. And I looked, and there was one guy, he even had a Nike swoosh tattooed on his calf. And I went, wow, these guys are serious, you get a Nike swoosh tattooed on your calf, you better be Michael Jordan, And so we're kind of nervous. We're looking at these guys, and we're kind of freaked out, and our coach pulled us together, and he says, you don't worry about these guys. They aren't who they seem to be. And so we got out and we played them, and I think, it was in the first quarter, we realized he was right. They weren't, and we won by 30 points at the end of that game, And we kind of learned that they had a whole bunch of money, in their school. They just kind of bought all this stuff, and they looked the part. They just weren't as good as they looked, And Paul says you got to find someone who is as they appear to be. Now, this is a huge shift for the people on Crete. You got to picture again here. Go back in this time machine to the island of Crete back in this day. You have to remember here that at this time the Cretans are not elevating good people as leaders. They're not elevating people who are good as heroes and as leaders. There's been this whole flip-flop. And so now what has happened is the bad guys who are the leaders. It are the pirates who are the heroes. They are the leaders in this society. And so people think of high moral characters as weak. And it's important that you win, not really who you are. And so who is lifted up? Who is idolized? Who are the big heroes? Well, they are the powerful, the people who win, but the people who are good are considered weak and soft, and they're not looked up to at all. And so Paul's telling them, you need to find a person who, even though the society says are good people who are wimps, you need to find some people who are good. And just in case, we think that having lived, living 2,000 years later, that our culture is so much different than Greek. I would dare say that there's some of that in our culture today, isn't there? That it's more important often if you win than if you have any sort of moral character. And Paul says it can't be like that at church. You can't win by any means necessary. You can't just try to win, even if it's by shady tactics. He says you can't be that way. He says a leader at a church, they must be blameless. They are who they appear to be. Now, Paul's going to flesh this out. Where are you to be blameless in life? Okay, he's going to flesh this out in two areas. In the first place that he points out is family. Titus 1:6 says, an elder must be blameless, faithful to his wife, a man whose children believe and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. Now, two things are mentioned here, and the first has to do with being a husband or a relationship with a spouse. Now, I don't have any problem with what Paul says here in this letter, but I have plenty of problems with how churches have often interpreted and applied Paul's words here. And so I want to clear this up, okay? So if you study Titus, if you study this verse, this section, and if you study this passage a lot, and I have, then you will see that it is interpreted often 6 to 7 different ways. The word here that's probably most interesting is the part that says faithful to his wife. It's a word, it's one word, and it literally means a one-woman man. You're looking for a one-woman man. And if you were just to kind of go with me into my library and study this word out, you would just find that there are several ways that this is kind of interpreted and applied, but probably the predominant way that it is applied is that you are looking for a man who is not a polygamist. You're looking for a person who has one wife. He is a one-woman man. He is not a polygamist. He doesn't have multiple wives. It's probably the predominant way this is interpreted and translated. But I don't really like that translation. I don't think it's really what this passage is all about, because if you know anything about Crete, what you quickly discover is that polygamy is not a problem on this island. Now, they got plenty of issues. They got plenty of problems, but polygamy is not one of them. And it seems to be a weird qualification for an elder if polygamy just really isn't a problem. You know, it'd be like if I got up here today and I said, we need some new elders at Pathways. And so what I want you to do is, if you could just kind of give me some names of people that you think would be good elders. And so what I want you to do, though, is could you just look around and find someone who's not a polygamist? And if they're not a polygamist, they might be pretty good material for elder here at Pathways. I don't know. I'm not sure that would really help us a whole lot. I assume we don't have a lot of polygamists here. Is that true? I don't know. You're all very quiet. Okay, if we do, don't tell me. All right? Or okay, just I don't want to know about it. Or if you're here, and if that's a real problem for us, meet me in the back afterwards, and I got a few things I'd like to share with you. I don't know. Okay, it's not an issue. We would probably craft a statement saying, well, please, if you're not a polygamist, you might fit in this role. So I don't think that's really it. Some have argued that if you kind of translate this verse or apply it, that it means it's a person who must be married. It's saying it can't be a single person. They must be married. It says faithful to one wife. How can you be faithful to your wife if you're not married? You can't be single. Some people have said that you cannot be divorced. Married, faithful to one wife means you can't be divorced. Some have said that if you're single because your wife has died or you're divorced, you can't be remarried. And some have even said that because of this verse, it means that an elder must be a man, because it says a one-woman man. So I don't buy any of those things. So let me just clear this up for you, okay? Because I want us to understand this passage in light of what Crete is all about here. So let me tell you, there's a phrase that was used in the ancient world, and it would have been used on the island of Crete at this time. And the phrase is, there is marital fidelity. There is marital fidelity. And I think that's what this verse means, and I think it's all that it means. This is a person, Paul says, you need someone who is faithful to their spouse. And on Crete, what we've learned is, that's a pretty rare person. You see, on Crete, you didn't just swindle others, you even swindled your spouse. And so the big problem on Crete wasn't polygamy. The big problem on Crete was adultery. That there were all these families that were broken apart because you had husbands and wives that were cheating on one another. And it wasn't even looked down upon. It was expected that you would cheat on your spouse in Crete. What was looked down upon is if you got caught. Because a swindler who gets caught isn't a very good swindler, and the highest ethic in this culture is to be the best deceiver that you could be. And so it's not wrong to cheat on your spouse, but it sure is awful to get caught. And Paul says, when you're looking for a leader at church, it cannot be that way in their family. They must be a person who is as they appear to be. Blank. He's not addressing the gender. In ancient Crete, that's just assumed that it's male. It may not be so today. He's not addressing, I don't think, other marriage issues. He's just, and you could talk about all those things if you want to, but what Paul is talking about here in the island of Crete, he's saying you need to find a person who is faithful and trustworthy in their faith. Now, there's a second thing that he mentions, and it's children. It says, a man, verse 6 says, a man whose children believe and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. What does that mean, okay? I don't know. Most of the time my children are fairly well behaved here, when we get here. But there are times that my children are wild and disobedient, okay? And so what in the world does this part of the text mean? I was at a church one time, and we just had this great person as a candidate for becoming an elder. I mean, they're a person that just... They're the type of person that a lot of other people were always seeking out for spiritual advice and for prayer, and just the type of person that just seemed to really care about people and just was just a great candidate for an elder. But they had one of their 3 kids who just was having a bunch of trouble in school, was in high school, and was getting kicked out of school and all this kind of stuff. And so there's some people that kind of brought up this person and said, I don't think this person should be a very good candidate for elder. And I don't know, what do you think? Does it mean you can't be an elder if you have kids that are struggling to grow up like other kids? Well, I don't know. Let's look at Crete here. Because Paul seems to be addressing something that's happening on Crete. Now, we know that on Crete, that the heroes and the leaders are pirates. They're people who are deceiving and swindling and all this kind of stuff. But what we find out, if you just kind of study history, is that these Cretan parents were oftentimes sending their children to schools and camps up in the hills, training them to become pirates. I mean, they were sending them to swindling school. They were sending them to pirate school to become pirates. I mean, could you imagine that? I mean, that's one kind of boarding school, I guess. Kind of send your kids off to learn how to be wild and disobedient, And so oftentimes they were training. It was not just that their kids were wild and disobedient, but that they were training them to be that way. And so often they would send them to these schools to learn how to be a pirate because later they could, be pirates and swindlers, and they could bring home money to the parents and to the family. And so what Paul's saying here is not that you have to have a perfect family with perfect kids. He's just saying, please don't choose someone to be a leader who is training their kids to be pirates. It's a word here, it says believe, children who believe. You can translate that faithful, trustworthy, reliable. In context, it's very similar, I think, to what we find in 1 Timothy 3. If Paul's saying here, you need to find someone, maybe their kids aren't perfect, but you need to find someone who is putting Jesus first in their family and trying to raise their kids to follow him. He's trying to raise them in a way that's countercultural. You get it? Someone who appears to be and is who they appear to be in their family. Here's the other arena that he talks about and where you should be blameless. And he says it's in their personal life. And starting in verse 7, we get a whole list of things that have to do with their personal life that Paul says qualifies someone to be an elder. Verse 7 says, since an overseer manages God's household, he must be blameless. Not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain. Rather, he must be hospitable, one who loves what is good, who is self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. Now, Paul gives this whole list here of things that an elder needs to have in their personal life. And so let's just kind of go, word by word through this thing. And hopefully with the background of Crete, you can understand why these things are uniquely imperative for leaders on this island of Crete. The first thing he says is, they are to be not overbearing. An elder should be one who is not overbearing. Now, in the first message in the series, if you missed it, I was telling you, if you go to Crete today, even today, if you were sailing through kind of Greece and you landed on Crete and you went there, they have these little souvenirs, these little statues of pirates. You know, they kind of are still proud of their pirate legacy. And so they have these little souvenir statues of pirates. And oftentimes on these little souvenirs, the pirate just kind of has a sneer on its face. And it was a reference to an old slogan about Crete that was called Cretan arrogance. This kind of haughty Cretan arrogance that we're better than you are and we'll take what you have. And Paul says you cannot be overbearing. It's kind of a reference to this idea of Cretan arrogance. You cannot have a leader who displays this kind of arrogance. I mean, it might be cool in society, but not in church. You can't have a leader in the church who thinks, I'm better than you. And I've seen leaders like that, haven't you? It doesn't make for a very good church. He says this, an elder should not be quick-tempered, drunk, or violent. I don't know about you, but if I had to describe what a pirate was like, I would probably use those three words. They are quick-tempered, drunk, and violent, right? I mean, that's what Paul's describing here. He says that might be how it is in society. That might be how it is in culture. That might be how so many of you get your money in this economic system, but it cannot be that way at church. We don't need any pirates as elders here. He says an elder should not be greedy for underhanded gain. I mean, this one should be pretty obvious by now, right? With all the kind of history lesson we've had on Crete. I mean, all of Crete's economy was based on swindling people. And Paul says, not here. You need leaders who are trustworthy. It says an elder must be one who is hospitable. Now, usually with hospitable, we think of someone who's hospitable. We think of kind of a people person, you know, they kind of go around and they're a good mixer at parties, you know. They seem to float around and be pretty outgoing, you know, an extrovert in some way. But I don't think that's really what Paul means here. This word hospitable, it's really closely related to generosity. And what Paul's saying is you need to find someone who is not just looking out for himself or herself. You need to find someone who is willing to look out for others. He says, my home is your home. My table, it's your table. My resources are available to you if you need them. You need to find someone who's not a stingy pirate who buries their money in the ground. You need to find someone who is generous, hospitable. So it's very different from most of Crete. There was no generosity. Every person was for themselves. It was just kind of a take, steal society. And Paul says, you need someone who will give. He says an elder is one who is a lover of good. A lover of good. And see, on Crete, there'd been a whole flip-flop of ethics. Now what was good was bad, and bad was now good. And Paul says when it comes to church, good better be good. You need someone who loves to do good. He says you need someone who's self-controlled. And all that means is you need someone who thinks before they act. You need someone who puts some forethought into what they're about to do. And see, on the island of Crete, the pirates there, they just kind of made decisions impulsively and emotionally. They didn't put much forethought into what they were doing. The only time anybody put any forethought into anything was when they were trying to seduce a woman or swindle a man. And Paul says you need to find someone who puts some forethought into how to do good. He says you need to find someone who is upright. Upright. It's a very important word. What it literally means here is not having two sets of books. You know, there's the accountant who has this set of books, but then they have the real set of accounting books. Can't operate that way. Things must be as they appear to be. He says an elder must be holy. That's kind of a religious word. It could mean a few different things. It could mean religious devotion. But I don't really think that's what he's talking about here. Holy, it means separate or different or other. In fact, it's often translated that which is utterly other. It's something completely different. And Paul, I think, is saying here, we need a leader who is completely different than what the culture values here. We don't need a pirate and a swindler. We need someone countercultural. We need a different standard of leader when it comes to church. It says we need a person who's disciplined. That just means a person who's mastered himself or herself, not a person who is living for themselves. And then let's read verse 9 here. Just one more qualification. I don't think it's on your paper here, but you can write it in. At verse 9, it says, he must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose him. What's a big qualification for being an elder? Well, Paul says, you need to know the Word. You need to know the Word. And it could be on Crete that there's a lot of people there that really just don't know the Word. They don't know God's Word at all. But I'll tell you what, you need for an elder someone who knows the Word. You really do. Someone who's familiar with what God has to say. That's a hugely important part of the role. But I'll tell you what, I know a lot of people who know a lot about the Word of God, but they don't use it very encouragingly. I mean, they use it to beat people up and to clobber them with it. They hurt people with it. And Paul says, you need someone who not only knows the Word, but knows how to use it in an encouraging way. That's quite a list, isn't it? But I mean, can you see how all these things in an environment like the island of Crete are imperative to having a good church there? There's a specific reason you need a person like this, and we're going to look at that next week. But what we know we need is a blameless person, someone who is who they appear to be. Now, Paul writes this letter to a group of people several thousand years ago and gives them some unique qualifications for what a leader in their church needs to have imperatively. And I was thinking about that this week in our own culture. You know, if Paul were to write to us today, you know, maybe he'd include a lot of those that he included right there. They all seem pretty good. But what might be some things that Paul would include for us? I don't know, but here's a few ideas. When it comes to 2016 and the Pathways Church, and here we are as a group of people, kind of some application out of that, you know, because we do need to bring on some new elders here. That's something that we're processing and working through. In fact, I'm going to ask you today at the end of this that if you have some ideas of names of people you think would make a really good elder, to text them in or come and tell me and submit them to us so that we can kind of go through that whole deal. But let me give you a couple things that I think are important to this church. And this isn't comprehensive either. You know, there's more. In fact, there's a little sheet in your handout that the current elders put together for what it means to be an elder in the Pathways Church, some things that we think are important in this context today. But let me give you a couple that aren't on there that I think are really important to us today. And here's the first thing. A person who loves the past but isn't stuck in it. You see, I think there's something really great about cherishing the past and having some nostalgia about things that have been. And we really need people in this church who are leaders that kind of know the history of this group, that kind of know where we've been, that know the values, know the meaning behind them, know the reason this church got started, kind of know the history of it, and can kind of look back and have some roots here and say, I know the vibe, the feel, the kind of goal, the purpose of this church. I know the history of this group, and I love its past, to understand those values. And we need some people that think fondly back on those days. But we also need elders, don't we, on the other hand of things? Don't we also need some leaders who are willing to press into the future? Who see all the good, you know, just kind of swing back in the chair of progress and see all that's good in the back, but propel themselves forward thinking about all that could be. We need leaders in this group, man, that see the legacy of this church, not as just those of us sitting here, but as the true legacy of this church as people who aren't even here yet. the outside. We need a person who loves the past but is biased towards the outsider, that will do whatever it takes to welcome in someone who's new. Here's another thing I think is real important for our group. We need leaders who are flexible and experimenting. This is an experimental church. Have you ever noticed that? It feels like one giant experiment to me every week. You know, we come in here, well, this is an experiment. Will it all get put together this week? You know, I guess kind of the whole idea of this church is there's so many churches out there. You don't have to come to Pathways. I mean, you could be a part of any church out there, and I think you could still be a Christian. But there's something about this group that said, we kind of want to do things different. We want to explore kind of our own path here. It feels like God's leading us down this way, and we're going to experiment, and we're going to try some things. And you may have noticed that about this group, is that we try different things, and we do different things, and we're kind of biased towards change. We're not really afraid of it. And so we try some things sometimes, and sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't work very well. And we all say, well, that didn't work very well, did it? No, it didn't. Let's not do that again. Okay, let's do something else next time. But we keep trying. We don't get too bothered by the failures. We just keep trying. We're going to try something new. We're going to go wherever God wants us to go. And we need leaders who are flexible enough that are okay with that kind of experimentation. Here's a big one, I think. At this particular time and place in the life of this church, maybe just in the time and place of this culture, we need leaders who are very sensitive to those who have been hurt by religion. We need leaders who not only know God's word and are willing to stand up for what's right, but we just need leaders also who are very sensitive to people who have been hurt and burned by the very worst of religion. You see, because a lot of us have found ourselves here in this group because we had a bad experience with religion somewhere along the line. Either personally, experientially, or by extension through someone else or through the media. And for many of us, Pathways is just kind of the last hope that we're holding on to when it comes to our relationship with Jesus and faith. And man, we just need leaders who understand this, don't we? We're sensitive to that. You don't just sit in a boardroom, not that we have one, and just kind of make decisions about things, but are willing to meet with people and sit with people and listen to people and hear their stories and pray with people and come alongside people and be okay with where they are at in their journey and to love them and to not make excuses for bad religion, but to apologize for it and point again to Jesus. We need to have leaders that are open to the honest pursuit of Jesus. And what I mean by that is that as we make this journey together, as we travel together as fellow companions walking this road together, we just kind of realize that we don't have all the answers. None of us do. I don't. And I don't think any of you do either. And I'm trying my best to follow Jesus as best as I can. I make mistakes. I don't have all the answers. And sometimes I just have to keep walking in faith even though I'm not sure exactly what the answer is. And we just have to be okay to admit that that's true, that there's mystery and complexity and tension in our walk with Jesus and what it means to follow Him, that we have questions and doubts and fears and uncertainties, and we need leaders who have the self-assurance, but maybe just the God assurance to make room for that in this group, that it's okay to process those things out loud, in public sometimes. Not afraid to rethink things in light of new information or question things that might need it. And we're willing to go through the discovery process, not just telling people what to think, but asking them if they'd like to and joining them in the process of that. I remember the first time I met Dean Keese, who's the guy who planted Pathways, and I was on staff of his church, and I was really bored and I was frustrated, and I didn't think I wanted to work in church anymore, and so I met with a guy, and he said, you should plant a church. I was like, that sounds awful. I don't want to do that at all. And he said, well, no, it sounds scary on the outside. He said, but maybe it's not all that it appears to be. Maybe it's easier. And so I know this. He matched me up with Dean, who we kind of had some connections with one another. We'd never met personally. So we sat down for lunch and we started talking, and I asked Dean, okay, I don't want to just know how it looks on the surface. You tell me, not just how it appears to be, but how it really is. And so he told me how it really was. Okay, we got to be about an hour 15 into that lunch, and he told me kind of what it was like to plant a church, and I was like, that does sound awful. Like, I never want to do that. He said, yeah, but he said, I'll tell you one thing. He said, it's kind of the phase in our life when we know we need to move on, and we think you should actually step into this community. And he said, I want to tell you that there's not everything is okie dokie there. Like, there's some problems right now. I don't think the church is going to survive if we leave. And he said, there's some big hurdles that would have to be overcome. And so he's like, I don't want to paint it this way, and it's not really that way. He's like, I just want to tell you how it is. But he said, there's one piece of good news. He said, there's some really good elders there. He said, I should have done it earlier. I never did it when I should have. I should have done it earlier. He's like, but the one thing I'm proud of here at the end is that we have some elders. And he said, they are really good elders. And they don't know what they're doing yet. He said, but they're really, really good elders. And so Tanya and I, we got together with them. We met, Bill and Robin and Brad and Geraldine. And even the Pyatt's were in on that, I remember getting together in the backyard of the Pyatt's house and sitting around a fire, and I think, we roasted some marshmallows and had dinner together and stuff. And we were sitting there, and I remember just meeting with them and hearing their heart, And there was all these things that I was scared about. There was all these things I was worried about, leaving a cushy job and coming to something that was very scary. But I just kept hearing their heart and realizing that Dean said it true, that there were some really good elders. And we sat around that fire, and I remember Brad, he said this, you looked at me, and you said, we don't want a pretty church. We don't want to have a pretty church. He said, we want a church for real people. You just don't have the energy to pretend it. And when I heard you say that, Brad, what I heard you saying is, we just want a church that's blameless. We are who we appear to be. We have some leaders like that already. I think we really do have a church like that. This morning we got the table set up over here. It's our communion. We go there and we remember the love of Jesus every day. And what it does is we go over there and we're reminded today that Jesus is the expression of God saying, I am who I appear to be. I say to them about love. I say that I care about you. But it's not just I say those things, but I'm willing to put it into action. I'm willing to go to the cross and die for you. And so when we go to the table, we are reminded that God can be trusted because He is exactly who He appears to be. And aren't you glad? You stand up with me? I'll pray for us. And we can find our way to the table this morning and worship. Pray. Hey God, I'm so grateful to be standing here in this room with my friends and my family here this morning. I'm so grateful that a few years ago that you moved in the heart of Dean and Leslie and got us together one afternoon for a conversation that led to so much more than I thought it would. I'm so grateful for the leaders that you put in this place long before I got here. I'm so thankful for that conversation in the backyard that day with the Pyatts and the Kings and the Moores, and for their leadership and the clear love that they have for people. God, we want to be a church that is blameless. We know we're not perfect. We know we're not spotless. We know we're not faultless. But we do want to be exactly who we appear to be. We want to be true. We want to be authentic. We want to be consistent. And so won't you help us, God, not to put on any airs, not to pretend, but to be exactly who we are. And God, as we do that, won't you keep changing us to be something so much more than we've ever been before? Won't you help us to be more like Jesus? Not that we pretend it more, but that you're changing us from the inside. So as we go to the table this morning, we're reminded by your goodness, your consistency, and your faithfulness to us. We love you, Jesus. Amen.
all the strides we made, for all our blessings, we've fallen far away from truth, turning our face away from this hurting ways. We turn our face away from you. We want to be your hands and feet. With our words, to let our actions speak. Oh, every broken heart, for every widow, for those without shelter from the rain. We lift our eyes to you, looking for answers. We have been called to ease the pain. We want to be your hands and feet. With our words, we'll let our actions speak. Here we are. Words can only go so far. Draw us closer to your heart. Bring us back to you. Bring us back to you. We are. Words can only go so far. Draw us closer to your heart. Bring us back to you. 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 We want to be your hands and feet. With our words and let our actions speak. We want to be your hands and feet. With our words and let our actions speak. Words can only go so far. Draw us closer to your heart. Bring us back to you. Bring us back to you. Bring us back to you. Bring us back to you.
seated. Got a text in and said, maybe the reason Paul had to remind Titus to do what he had already told him is that the elders were probably very hard to find on this island. I think you might be right. Yeah, qualifications are probably pretty hard to get through there with a list of pirates. So I have a couple announcements here for you today as we wrap up. And we have a little video I'm going to show you right here at the end as well. So let me give you a couple announcements, and as the video plays, maybe you guys can come down and collect up some stuff. First of all, our next step cards, if you have one of these you want to fill out, I think it's great. One of the things we always want to be doing is figuring out how do we continue to follow Jesus, not just become complacent. So this isn't really a new visitor card. It's not like I've been here before, that's fine. If you've been here lots of times, I don't really need all your information. But maybe it's just something like, hey, I want to choose to follow Jesus this way this week. And there's some ideas on here, but maybe you've done all of these, or Jesus is kind of calling you to a different step, and you can kind of fill in your own there at the bottom. And if these guys are already collecting up and you're still thinking, there's a little box on the back there that you can drop them into. The other thing is we are trying to choose some new elders here. We got some great names a while back. We're going to finish up that process. And so if you'd like to submit some other names, there was a little handout inside of the folder today. And there's a little place you can email someone if you have a list of a person, a name of a person, a list of a person, a name of a person that could go on a list, something like that. So that would be great. And there's a little process for how we select elders that is on there as well. Also, I saw this is awesome. We have a bunch of Thanksgiving baskets back there. If a lot of you took home a basket with a shopping list and brought it back, that's great. We really appreciate that. And quite a few of you have come to me and said, hey, do you need money to buy hams and turkeys and all that kind of stuff? And so some of you have given me money for that too. If you would like to contribute to that, you can see me afterwards, and we'd be happy to have you give that way as well. Then coming up December 4th, we're doing a soup and bread lunch fundraiser. So the team is going to Africa. It's great. They need to raise some money to get all the way to Malindi, Kenya this summer. And you can help them by eating lunch. Isn't that amazing? Because America. We eat in order to help people. There's going to be homemade soups and breads and all that kind of stuff. And so you can join us December 4th after this gathering. And we'll eat together. And you can contribute that way to help the team go. All right? There's one other cool thing. Our youth ministry partners with New Hope Christian Church, which is just on the other side of the freeway over here, and they're doing some really special stuff for Thanksgiving. And so I want to show you a little bit of this video. Sean is the name of the youth pastor there, and a lot of our adults actually are serving over there. Some of our students are going over there, and this is crazy. The schools over there in South Everett have just invited him into the schools just to do whatever you want. If you want to do Bible studies here, if you want to do whatever. And so they have 70 junior high kids oftentimes on Thursday nights. Now it's this little tiny church that's falling all apart, and there's 70 kids in there, and it's really, really neat. And so a lot of them come from under-resourced families and backgrounds, and so they're doing a special Thanksgiving meal for them, and he needs some help. And so this might be some, maybe it's just a one-time thing, right? Like maybe you don't want to help out with youth group all the time. Understandable. But maybe just like this event might be kind of fun. So I'm going to let him kind of share about it on this video here, and then I think we'll sing one last song. Okay?
Hey Pathways, if we haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Sean Smith, and I am the youth and neighborhood pastor over here at New Hope Christian Church in South Everett. I want to start off by just thanking your community for the support and ministry and the partnership that we've been able to have in advancing the kingdom. Seed has continually evolved throughout the years, and a lot of that has to do with this partnership. So many of you have been here serving weekly. You've served at our seed gatherings. You've supported us with special events. You even helped provide resources for families that are really in need. We really couldn't thank you enough here, and we are just so thankful for that support and what you guys are doing. It's making a tremendous impact in the students' lives that we serve, and making Jesus' name known to them, and providing hope for the hopeless. So really, guys, thank you. You have been a true partner in ministry. One of the things that we take pretty serious over here at Seed is that anyone who comes and participates in our community, we welcome them as family. It doesn't matter where they come from, it doesn't matter what they believe. We just know that Jesus loves them where they are right now, and it's our goal to show and express that love to them to whoever comes to seed throughout the week. So as a family, we love to celebrate the holidays, and one way that we do that is through an event that we call the Feast. Every year around Thanksgiving, we shut down our regular youth group and provide a Thanksgiving meal for students so that we can eat and laugh and enjoy each other's company and reflect on the things that we're thankful for. This year will be our biggest year serving students, as we predict that we'll probably have around 80 to 90 students come through our door between our high school and our middle school youth. And that's pretty exciting, but it poses some real challenges, as we've never served that many kids and made a Thanksgiving meal quite that big before. I'm sharing this with you guys because we're in need of servers. I don't know how many of you have ever been exposed to middle school students, but there's something crazy that happens when you give them food and you ask them to serve themselves. They like instantly become four-year-olds. Food ends up everywhere. They take way too much. It's just a big mess. And so we're actually looking for some adults that can come and help portion out the foods, put them on plates, serve the students, which would make the whole evening just flow a little bit better too when we're talking about these bigger numbers of students. So if you're interested in coming and serving and being a part of the feast, you can connect with Jen Otto, who's kind of our head chef, and she's also a small group leader for some of our 7th grade girls. By the way, if you haven't given Jen a high five today, you probably should do that because she's pretty amazing. So the dates of the feast are November 30th for our Seed High School and December 1st for our Seed Middle Schoolers. You can come to one, you can come to both. Either way, we'd be blessed by your service. Other than that, I hope that you guys have an awesome Sunday this morning, gathering and worshiping together. I hope to come to one of your guys' gatherings soon, meet some more Pathwasians, and until then, I'll be praying for you all. And I just wanted to show you a little clip of...
There it went.
There's no clip, but we're going to sing another song. So you can stand up. We're going to sing about doing good, and how, much like what Sean was just talking about, how the worship begins when we leave. And that this song is kind of about following the good road and having no fear. So it's going to be new for some of you, but it's really easy. My friend wrote it, and it's very singable. So here it goes.